So let's begin. And let's begin the proceeding with a call to the audience. Is there-
Are you recording, Dan?
It is recorded.
Okay, so we have a member of the audience who would like to.
And I'm officially a member. of the
Okay.
audience, too. I have two items.
So the floor is open.
Margo, can you hear us as well?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And I think everyone's met Kay. You want to just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm to the people that are speaking. I'm Kay Henshaw. And I am a prospective buyer of the property at 5301 for Lowell, restored money building. And so in the process at the moment, so, moving forward. I love the little place. I love the community, but I live just up the street in Portland, please. But there's some issues, that I'm having, and it's sort of, I guess, between the city and you guys. And I'm just not clear as to what we are with that. My understanding from the seller and the seller's realtor is that the property everything is fine, the city okayed the project and it's ready for sale. But then I'm hearing from you guys that there are issues, some possible issues. And so I'm just I feel like I'm sort of caught in the middle and not quite sure what to do, how I should move forward. So I thought this would be a good chance to come and, just tell you where I am and how I feel about it, I guess. I really would like to get the property, but I feel as though I need some assurance from everybody involved that it will be okay, that it will be free of encumbrances when I take over, and that it's not, somebody's not going to come back to me after the fact and say, oh, you have to do this and you have to do this. So, that's sort of where I am. So I'm not quite sure what I should do. If I should ask you guys to write a letter, whether I need to be working with the city, if you guys need to be working with the city, I don't really know exactly how to move forward.
Yeah,
But
so
I want to.
Are you familiar with this?
yeah, so I became aware of that on Friday. We have just to let you know, we're reviewing the documents related to this. There were some issues with this back in
Yeah.
October and December.
If I can read, maybe, I think
Go right
the
ahead.
best thing is to read this into the record, maybe. This is the email from the Tucson Historic Preservation Foundation. And it's concern regarding non-compliance at 5301 East Fort Lowell. And so I think everybody, I got it sent directly to me,
Mhm.
and Mary Lou got it. And then I think you've all seen it now, probably, right? But it's on behalf of the Tucson Historic Preservation Foundation. It's from Damian Klinko. Bring your attention to concern regarding rehabilitation at 5301 East Fort Lowell. We're deeply concerned several conditions recommended after hours of meetings by the Fort Lowell HPZAB and required the notice of decision letter attached issued by your office were not met. While 3 of conditions were met, the remaining 3 were not addressed. And as such, the completed work does not comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, which are critical to preserving the building's historic integrity and purpose within the HPZ. Non-compliant conditions. Number 1, windows. The condition required the installation of single or double hung windows. However, a divided light window style lacking historic precedent within the zone or district was installed, despite this issue being thoroughly discussed during HPZ meetings. Number 2, bathroom window. The approved design for the bathroom window was altered without authorization. The installed window is a double pane stained glass window affixed to the wall, which deviates significantly from the approved specifications. 3, exterior finish. The condition specified the exterior shall have smooth lime plaster treatment. This recommendation was critical for the longevity and stability of the unstabilized adobe structure Instead, the building was plastered with concrete and painted, which is not in compliance with the approved guidelines and may compromise the integrity of the vernacular materials. Additional issues, the size of the original window openings has been altered. Original concrete sills were either covered or reduced in size. Sections of historic adobe in the sidewall were left exposed or remain unstabilized, posing significant risks to the structure's long-term stability. Given the attention paid to this project, the importance of the building, multiple reviews and HPZ meetings, I'm concerned as to how this is allowed to proceed in violation after approved conditions. This is particularly troubling in light of the code enforcement complaint filed on October 22nd, detailed on Pro, which says HPZ renovations are not being followed by the HPZ requirements. The concerns are the stucco in the windows.
Similarly, I filed an individual code complaint about these issues back in October as well, and unfortunately, they just kept moving forward.
These deviations undermine the preservation goals of the HPZ and compromise the historic integrity of the building. We appreciate your thoughts on how these issues will be fixed to ensure project aligns. And then the response from Corin Manning was, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll look into this and get back to you and this group next week. So that's the issue. And
Yeah.
because it's not on the agenda, we can't really
Yeah.
decide anything, or they can't really decide anything.
Well,
Right.
I just, so just to let
ahead.
you know, I mean, we've both sent an inspector out there to take a look at kind of what's been built versus, what was required via decision letter, via, approved plans. So we're looking at that right now. We're also reaching out to the owner applicant as well to get an understanding of the situation and figure out what to do moving forward. So as of now, we are doing our research and doing our due diligence to figure out what those next steps are. So I just wanted to let you know that that's kind of where we're at. We should know more this week as we kind of work through those avenues. I can give you my card, and I'm happy to kind of help you out and kind of share some of this information with you as well.
Thanks.
Of course, here you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you still in your inspection period for this home?
Well, we've had the inspection, so now after that, there's a 10-day period, which is up after tomorrow midnight. And I was just talking to my ruler, and I said, well, there's no way that we're gonna get this settled. And I said, can you ask for an extension? She said she would, so hopefully we can extend at least to the end of this week.
Okay.
So, and maybe I'll check back with you in a couple days and.
Yeah, please, reach out to me tomorrow. And at least, kind of let me know what your contact information, things about is. And I'll let you know, as soon as we know more about the situation.
That's good. But do know that the windows are a big issue, a huge issue for me. I mean, even though, I want a double hung window for sure in the 2 bedrooms, but the windows that they installed they're just laughable.
Yeah.
They not only do they don't look right, but they don't function, they don't work, and they leak. There's no leak holes, the water just pours into the room. So, well, thank you guys very much for.
I recommend to get as long of an extension as you
Yeah.
can, because this is going with the city, you can always wrap up sooner than your extension provides for, but
What do you think do you think it would be better to ask for a week? Is that what?
at least, this is kind of like a sort of like a U-turn or a detour that a transaction can take, and it could be a certain amount of time.
Okay, well, I'll do what I can then. Hopefully, I don't know why they would say no unless he just wants to throw me away and go after somebody else. But, okay, well, that sounds good. I'll be in touch then.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, this code enforcement was filed on October 22nd and closed on December 6th. And the closure said renovations, or that's the.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
The comments were on site, on property, owner has permits, for remodel and has been issued.
Hmm.
That was the only response to it.
Okay, and then they
I
just
got
went ahead and didn't
an
actually.
email back that was basically said something to the effect of, these people don't have to follow their conditions. And that, I felt very disempowered and I stopped working on this project because it's like, why am I sitting on this board?
So what are the rate? I mean, maybe this is an unfair question, but what are the range or what are the parameters of pathways forward here then?
So I will say this, I saw an email exchange that we have from back in October where the applicant architect said that they were going to replace the windows with the correct windows, that their contractor was mistaken and that they were supposed to do that. And they basically said they were going to do that. And so, like I said, we need to reach out to them and we need to reach out and figure out what happened.
And what about the concrete plaster going onto the walls when we're very clear that this is a lime plaster neighborhood? This was just dismissed.
Yeah, no, like I said,
I just
I
want to know why
only
we're
know what I
sitting here
know,
to do
but
these
yeah.
Conditions, if then someone's gonna violate them, the violation's gonna get reported. And then the project's gonna keep moving forward and now be like having an economic impact on somebody trying to purchase a home and someone trying to sell a home. This is not good. And it's very disempowering to us as a board who's sitting here trying to embrace and learn all of these codes and rules and support this neighborhood. And then these issues are getting reported months in advance. And now, somebody who wasn't even in the room is being impacted.
Yeah, no, understand the frustration. Like I said, we just need to work through the process and figure out what the issues are.
Okay.
Thanks, Gil.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And maybe if you could communicate with David since Mary Lou's out, and then.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And then the second problem that I was and asked to become involved with.
It's an endorsement of yours. That's what it is.
If only that were true. Is email that went that went from glasses, a solution to this problem. Went from Colleen Sackheim and Barry Spicer concerning landscape alterations at 5425 East Fort Lowell.
Mhm.
And were you guys aware of this?
Well, you mentioned at the end of the age. Rocks.
Yeah, it has to do with the installation of boulders does not require, that's Corin's response. Writing to express our concerns about what appears to be out of character with the Fort Lowell Historic District. Property owners have placed large, oversized, sharp-edged boulders on site in front of the historic home, which are not naturally found in this area. Oversized, freshly excavated boulders imply incorrectly a geological, ecological, and historical ecosystem that does not exist here. Such boulders are native to areas in the Catalina foothills. These boulders are not native to this neighborhood. I'm paraphrasing this. And then it talks about the neighborhood, where the neighborhood's located geologically, as a flagship property in both historic district and the Old Fort Lowell neighborhood. This home plays an important role in preserving the area's unique character. It's also our understanding that landscape plans submitted by the owners did not include these boulders, raising concerns about compliance with historic preservation standards. We request that the city investigate this matter and take appropriate action. And then the response, again, from Corin is that the installation of boulders does not require historic preservation review per the UDC 5.8.9 L2, which reads, plantings and other ornamental features shall reflect the historic period of the subject structure. Landscaping may be reviewed in the context of the required HPZ review. Landscaping alone shall not be considered through an HPZ review. Landscaping materials such as boulders are not reviewed on their own, but could be reviewed as part of a project that requires historic preservation review. In other words, addition, alteration, or new construction. So again, this goes back to a problem and complaint from this property owner
Mhm.
who said he had applied for courtesy review where he applied for minor review. The city said would give his plans. He ultimately went ahead with this project.
Yeah, all I know is that we reached out to him multiple times to get him to submit his plans and he never did. And then obviously that's what happened,
Yeah.
but I was included on the initial, on those emails back in, I think it was November or whatever, where we reached out to him several times to try to get him to do so, and they never responded.
This was
So I'm
from
not entirely
December
sure what happened.
From Marion.
But they never submitted to us.
So I'm just making you aware of at this point.
Thank you.
So. Thoughts?
I unfortunately have to recuse myself from weighing in on this one, one of my clients, so.
I mean, Ollie's got a point. But it is interesting to me that the guidelines state that that makes such a broad, I guess, conclusion that any landscaping doesn't need any kind of review. That's rather striking to me.
I will
Yeah,
say
it's in the
as a
code.
point of, and this will hopefully come up when we start reviewing the guidelines, that the landscape not needing review is a big sticking point with me.
I just, it seems like,
It seems,
yeah.
if somebody
they could
comes to remove,
put in all the
50
palm
native
trees I
mesquite
want,
trees.
right?
yeah, or put in 50
Seems
palm trees in
Like
their
that's
place,
in-
right?
In the
It's not-
spirit of.
Yeah.
Of the historical stuff.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately, I mean, again, tied a little bit to what we can do in what the code requires
Yeah,
related
no,
to
and
that,
it's the
but
code.
I mean,
But
the
yeah.
code does have a lead line that is an intent and purpose of this entire section of code, and that like the interpretation of the code should be within the intent and purpose of its existence, which is the opening. And I feel that continuously we're being pushed into the minutia of the code while disacknowledging incompleteness, the actual purpose of these zones, which is not to facilitate development in them, but to preserve them as historic spaces and allow development to happen when appropriate. They're different than the rest of the city, but somehow this intent and purpose is continuously feeling overlooked in the conversations that we're having. And it's more focused on the city doesn't want to interpret the word structure to be inclusive of the definition of structure in a pool and get down into that kind of nitty gritty, instead of the purpose of this code, which is to help this neighborhood move forward in harmony. And so, yes, of course, a pool with or without a fence being built should come through this board. But like we're just continually coming up against these same issues, property after property. It's very frustrating.
I will say this, like part of why it ends up being frustrating, I'm sure, is the fact that we have to be consistent on how we look at it. And we're being consistent with how we have over the years, and our zoning administrator is the person who makes those determinations, and that's how it's done. So you can't look at something here differently from how you look at it other parts of the code. And that's why you end up in situations like this. We don't require review for landscaping. It's pretty clear that that's how it is. I will say that, if it were to come in with other things, or if they wanted to come in with a courtesy review, we would have set it up for them. Or if they were doing an addition, or they were making some sort of modifications, that would have come in and it would have been a part of the broad review. And we added in at that point because it's a part of the design guidelines.
So actually, if it's reviewed in the context of a required HPC review, so even a wall would
Yep.
bring
we'll do
in
it
to
too.
a landscape.
Yeah. It is odd. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree.
But I mean, that at least
No, I
then you
know.
get some review, right?
So if this continues to come up, when is the city going to support this board? We are but citizens. You all are policy creators and stuff. Like,
We need direction from mayor and council
uh-huh.
to make any changes. So
So
it
we should
would
go down
be,
there to share our disempowerment at the open call.
or you can talk to your council member and your council member
Mhm.
can say this is important, and mayor and council can say this is important, and that's how the process works.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, should we move on to the
Yes.
design guidelines?
Yes.
I have them on my computer. You want
Well,
one?
I printed them out because,
I'll take a copy.
no, you don't have to keep it, but some people prefer paper, right?
Yes.
And
Draft,
so I gave you
Six.
both versions.
both versions.
Dr. Hill would like to request a read of the document.
Yes, as we discussed earlier. One of them, I'm sure you're familiar, David, well, maybe this isn't my own academics do it, but. When it was in academia, the best way to tackle a paper to make sure it was ready for submission was to read through it, so. And figure out whether or not it adheres to your standards as you're going.
So where did we? Did we get to a certain point? I'm not suggesting that's where we start, but just as a matter of fact, where did we leave off?
We kind of went through it
Okay.
by sections last time,
And did we get?
and the comments that were made,
Oh.
2 rounds. We went through, like, this is draft 6, right?
Mhm.
The 2 rounds through the city, and then the reviews by this board, and all those comments have been incorporated. So, and the way to read it is that the blue text is the new text.
Shall I start by reading
Not
it?
new from the last.
No,
document,
no.
Just
It's
new from
new from,
the very-
it's new from the January 27th, 2004 version of this document.
There's a lot of work.
Which was exactly 20
I
years
love
ago.
your idea.
21 years ago.
Oh, yeah, 21 years ago.
So I'd like to request that this board move on this tonight so we can move it forward.
Okay, so let's get reading.
All right,
So, and I don't know that you want to read every word, but
no, I think a lot of the history. Stuff we
Yeah.
kind of gone through,
Mhm.
we can start at least with purpose, if you want, or we can even just jump through.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
There's only 9 pages. There's some graphics. Okay, moving past history. I'll start if nobody else feels moved to. The Historic Preservation Zone, HPZ, protects and perpetuates the cultural heritage of a unique part of southern Arizona. This is achieved by maintaining historic integrity through retention and preservation of early buildings and settlings, as well as guiding new development to maintain or enhance the character of the neighborhood. The Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone Advisory Board has established design guidelines and reviews all projects within the Historic Preservation Zone. The members are appointed by the Tucson Mayor and City Council and are composed of landowners, residents, and specialists in history, architecture, archaeology, and other related fields. These designations are intended to ensure the preservation of significant historic and archaeological resources. It is intended that new or remodeled buildings or structures located within the HPZ be designed and constructed to harmonize and be compatible with existing buildings and structures within the sites and development zones. Prior to the submission of a development proposal, it is recommended that an applicant consult with the HPZ Advisory Board, review these guidelines, and refer to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehab. All property applicability. All properties, buildings, signs, structures within the HPZ require a review by the Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board for development and improvements. This applies for residential, commercial, or institutional use, including new construction or improvements that do not otherwise require permits. These guidelines are intended as a general framework. Specific requirements described in the City of Tucson Development Standards, Technical Standards Manual, and Unified Development Code can be acquired from the City of Tucson Planning and Development Services Department and online. The HPZ is governed by the United Development Code 5.8, which establishes the purpose, applicability, and legal procedures for the administration of the HPZ. The focus of the HPZ is to preserve the character of existing areas of Tucson that are unique. The design standard for exterior alterations, additions, and new constructions within HPZs are provided in the UCD 5.89. And further defined in the technical standards section 9-02. Since each historic area within the city is distinct with its own development style, each has its own section for technical standards. Fort Lowell is described in the technical standards sections 9-02.7.5 and refers applicants to these specific guidelines for properties within the Fort Lowell Historic Zone. This document,
Stuff right there. So any comments on any of these, this text?
Not yet, maybe if you could just read the footnote for development, I think it's important to have that definition.
oh, excuse me. Development has a footnote identifying it from the UDC, any human alteration to the state of land, including its vegetation, soil, geology, or hydrology. That's the code. For any residential, commercial, industrial, utility, or other use, such as, but not limited to, clearing, grubbing, or grading of the land, and structural improvements. Examples: buildings, walls, fences, signs, and vehicular uses and areas. Okay, this document details those specific guidelines, jumping back onto page 4 here. Projects are reviewed in accordance with the full or minor HPZ review procedures. This applies to all development and structures. And boulders, apparently, according to the definition that we just read, new from the UDC. New construction of any kind of building or structure, including all accessory structures such as ramadas, walls, or sheds, alterations to primary buildings and secondary buildings and structures. Oops, there's a typo there.
No, it's a footnote.
Oh, excuse me. Structures, including residential, commercial, or institutional uses. Structure is also defined down below in a footnote. A physical element constructed or erected with a fixed location on the ground or attached to another physical element having a fixed location at, below, or above grade. Structures include such elements as, but are not limited to, buildings, paved areas, walls, fences, posts, and patios. Where'd that footnote go? Thank you. Continuing down with the bullet points, enclosures, landscapes, this is projects that require a full or minor review. Enclosures, landscapes, and hardscape elements and site furnishings on the site, such as fences, walls, gates, screens, walkways, driveways, ramadas, outdoor lighting, or signs. Buildings or structures that are moved into the HPZ are located on a site. Solar HVAC installations, pool and pool fences, roof, window, door, etc. replacements. All new construction, alterations, additions to and demolition of any structure must be reviewed by the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone Advisory Board and the Tucson-Pima County Historic Commission and approved by City of Tucson Development Services Director. Demolition, the removal or relocation of any structure is not allowed without prior approval. Ease of approval and the acquisition of a permit depends on the classification of the structure and whether the structure is an imminent hazard to public safety and the repairs would be impractical. Review or demolition of structures is addressed below. Demolition of structures within the HPZ are governed by the Unified Development Code. For structures designated as intrusions or non-contributing, non-historic properties in the HPZ, the PDSD director shall consult with the appropriate HPZ advisory board and the Tucson-Pima County Historic Commission Lands Review Subcommittee to ensure that the structure is properly classified at the time of the request for demolition. If the structure is not an institution or non-contributing, non-historic, no further review shall be required. If the PDSD director determines that the structure has not been properly designated, the PDSD director may delay the issuance of the permit until the proper designation is determined by the zoning administrator or may proceed with the appropriate review process if the designation has been changed. And now on to the process. The Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board encourages owners and designers, builders of projects to discuss the project informally at the concept stage. Every building of the site is, and site is unique. Every building that looks identical have a few details or settings that distinguish them from others. This means that what is appropriate for one building may not be appropriate for another. Each building must be looked at on an individual basis by the property owner designer and by the Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board. The steps for review: an applicant must contact the City of Tucson Planning and Development Services or refer to the City of Tucson website for the current application process and instructions found here. A courtesy review of early plans and design concepts is highly recommended before the formal review. It's beneficial to the applicant to better understand the design guidelines. The applicant submits main project application for building permits or development package through PDSD. The applicant submits a historic preservation zone review application. The review is scheduled, and then with the board in this room, and then the review is scheduled with Tucson Pima County Historic Commission Plan Review Subcommittee, and then a decision is issued by Tucson Development Services Director. Applicant completes the building permit process if approved with no appeals.
So is this okay for you? I mean, from the city perspective for
Yeah,
the outline of the.
that looks good. Actually, I think that'll be really helpful for people once they actually look at the guidelines.
A really minor thing, just numbers instead of bullets, since they're steps. Very pedantic, but
Okay.
And maybe turn this first step into a suggested step, like in parentheses, suggested, come meet with the board. Then begin your application for your paid application and stuff. It's because it's right here,
It says that above.
but I would make it a step so that it's more like, consider this a step. It's optional.
Okay.
step 0.
Yeah. It's a pre-step.
Or something like parentheses recommendation,
Yeah,
recommended or something like that.
Yes, recommended before you begin this process. Do this.
I just don't, I want to make it clear that it's not required,
It can
But
be
yeah,
recommended.
but I think like recommended would work.
And it's nice, Lane, because you got it in there a couple of times already, so hopefully the repetition of hearing it will help, or reading it.
What was, I just can't find it. The PDSD on page 4 of the very last paragraph, was that acronym referred to before? I just, because when I saw it, as we read it, I couldn't remember.
So at the
what that-
top of 4, it says Planning and Development Services Department, but it doesn't have parentheses that say PDSD, so maybe that's where, I don't know, I'm sure it's probably.
Okay.
Yeah,
Put it in.
and it's. And this is probably a minor point, but projects are reviewed this is so on page 4, third of the way down, before the introductory sentences to the bullet point. Projects are reviewed in accordance with the full or minor HPZ review process, procedures. And when you were reading it, you made an editorial note. I think it was the third one that this is a minor review.
Oh, did I say that?
You
Sorry.
did. Well, no, but it raised it's
Full or minor, I think she said, but yeah.
well, but then I think you said like, well, this bullet point, you didn't say that, but this is a minor review. I wonder if would it be worthwhile after each of these bullet points to designate that this would be a major, this would be a minor? I know that those are probably
So the
defined later.
only issue is that it is case by case, and sometimes like you can have a full review that includes things that would normally be in a minor review. So I think
Okay.
that's part of the reason, because
Okay.
it is kind of
Okay,
cumulative.
so,
It's like you might be putting in a small wall, right, that might be a minor review, whereas a wall that's 30 feet long, 60
Gotcha.
feet long, 6 feet tall, it's made
okay.
for.
Well, 4 points. Shall I continue? Does anybody else
You're
want to?
doing a great job.
Full HPZ review. Full review is required for most improvements, alterations to structures, and new construction. The following project types are reviewed for compliance with the applicable standards in accordance with the full HPZ review procedure. Marco, were you trying to comment?
No, I think,
I thought I heard the speaker going, sorry.
no, I'm coughing.
Oh. The HPZ review procedure, grading or the erection or construction of a new structure, a permit for any alteration involving modification, addition, or moving of any part of an existing structure, including signs that would affect the exterior appearance, except as provided in section 5.8.8.c, minor HPZ review. Reviews or new construction as provided for in sections 5.8.8.c minor HPZ review that the PDSD director determined shall be approved under the full review process due to the cumulative effects of the phased work that would normally be subject to the applicability of the HPZ review process.
And those are. UDC,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
It's not, in other words, it's referencing the UDC, not this document.
The construction or enlargement of a parking lot within an HPZ or on a property containing historic landmark exceptions. The following project types are reviewed as part of the minor HPZ review procedure: installation of solar panels or cisterns, or installation of or roof repairs to a roof. Comments? Okay.
So, so the installation or repairs to a roof. Right, so I'm guessing we're talking about if we need to. Remove a roof and put one on, in that case, right? The reinstallation, not. I mean, it has to be, but we're saying in kind, I'm assuming. So if it's a built-up roof, you're gonna put a built-up roof on? Or if it's you see what I'm saying? So it's like, because in some instances, I would think you would need a full review if you're completely changing what your roof looks like.
Well, so the full review
Right.
talks about that.
That would be an
about the
alteration.
cost. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Minor review, sorry.
Should I continue? All right,
No,
okay. In general, the minor HPZ review process is for projects that do not require building permits. Specifically, the following project types are reviewed for compliance with the applicable standards in accordance with the minor HPZ review procedure. Minor or necessary repairs to the structure, provided that the total cost of such improvements is under $1,500, except for the replacement cost of appliances and mechanical equipment. And the repairs involve replacement with materials of identical or historically accurate design. That or should probably be an and.
Which one?
And the
Identical
second
or
minor
historically?
bullet point,
Yeah.
the repairs involve, and colors to those being replaced. Do you know where I am?
Repairs to.
It's in this one, this or,
Should be.
identical and historically. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, right?
Sure.
That one, if otherwise it should be coming to review. That was just the question you were discussing, I think.
It could be historically accurate and not identical.
Well, then that's an alteration that should come through the board. You shouldn't just be switching up your roofing materials without
Well,
stopping you.
not just roofing materials, right? It's to any minor review or any minor structural change.
Oh,
This is actually right.
Yeah, so I think this is right, because you can think of like
It's
fences
from
and walls and stuff like that,
Okay.
but yeah.
Emergency repairs provided by that the repairs involve replacement with materials of identical or historically accurate design, size, or color to those being replaced. The change in copy of a sign, any alteration that does not require a permit involving the modification, alteration, or moving of any parts or existing structures that would affect the exterior appearance. Alterations include, but are not limited to, fences and walls, except those alterations that the PDSD director determined shall be approved under the full review process due to the cumulative effect of the phased work that would normally be subject to the applicability of the HPZ review. Installation of solar panels or cisterns, or installation of or repairs to a roof. No. Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board will request a full review of new walls and fences on contributing historic properties.
So this is added,
Mhm.
right? This is not part of the normal.
So,
In other words, what we're saying here is that even though ordinarily it might be a minor review on a contributing historic property, the board would request a full review.
Okay.
So just quickly, the word installation, I think is what I'm getting held up on in this, in the bullet point just above where you are, where the note is. And in the bullet point for exceptions above 4.3. If you could just make that replacement instead of installation. I think
So
installation
that's bullet
implies
point.
something novel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're
so
talking
this-
about solar panels or
So
systems?
installation of solar panels or cisterns, or replacement of or repairs to a roof. It says installation of and repairs to a roof. Right? So installation of a roof implies that there's novel materials, right?
Mhm.
Whereas replacement of a roof implies that they're gonna use the same materials that were there.
Yeah, wordsmith,
Sorry.
good with it. Apparently, the deepest minutia of these words may matter.
They really do.
Turns out it does.
Classifications and development zones, plural. Those are in different, one plural, one singular. The
There's
heading.
usually not more than one development zone as it relates to a project.
I see. There are 5 classifications of structures and properties within the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone. They are historic landmark, contributing historic, contributing non-historic, non-contributing intrusions. Requirements for additions, alterations, and demolition vary greatly depending on the classification of the structure of the building and the development zone. Within the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone, new construction, alterations, or additions to contributing non-historic or non-contributing structures shall reflect the architectural style of and be compatible with and compared against the contributing historic properties located within its development zones. In other words, only contributing properties should be used as a reference in the design process. Development zone. There's a citation, development zone, City of Tucson definition, as used in 5.8, H, Historic Preservation Zone, HPZ, Section 5.10, Neighborhood Preservation Zone, and Section 5.11, Rio Nuevo District, a certain designated area adjacent to the lot to be developed. Public and institutional structures within the development zone are not considered to be part of the development zone when evaluating proposed development on an adjacent property, except for public and institutional structures on or eligible for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places. The development zone is determined as follows. Where the subject lot is an interior lot, the development zone includes all lots on either side of that lot and fronting on the same street in the same block, and all those lots on the opposite side of the street, except such portions of the development zone that fall outside the boundary of the HPZ, NPZ, or RND. Where the subject lot is a corner lot, the development zone includes that lot, the corner lot diagonally opposite that lot, and all lots fronting on the same 2 streets in the same block, and all the lots on the opposite side of those streets, except such portions of the development zone that fall outside the boundary of the HPZ, NPZ, or the RND. Where the subject lot is located adjacent to the historic zone boundary, the development zone includes that lot, all lots located within the same block, and those lots facing the same street has the subject lot within one of block either direction, except such portions of the zone that fall outside the boundary, HPZ, NPZ. Since this is Fort Lowell Historic, can't it just be the HPZ? Can't we just be calling this the historic, because this is the Fort Lowell guidelines? So do we have to keep referring to these other, the
This is
neighborhood?
from the code.
Yes, but we're providing a resource for people who are doing development in this neighborhood. So I think bringing up these other historic districts at this juncture is a little confusing because this packet is for people who are doing things with properties in this neighborhood. So just to streamline this, what is already a very bulky section, I would say to bring the focus back to Fort Lowell. It just feels like this document has drifted a little bit very deep into the policy documents of the city that are above this document. That's okay. but I think we can streamline this to just Fort Lowell.
Well, I have to tell you that this has gone back and forth
Oh,
over
it
the last
has?
year, yes,
Okay,
because nobody understood the development zone.
well, it
So-
continues to be a sticking point, doesn't it?
It does, and the reason it's in here, and you can take it out if you want to take it out, is that this kind of explains it. If we're gonna,
Okay,
this is, people are being directed to this document, then they need to understand what they're up against.
gotcha.
I wonder if maybe just having like a call out box or something that shows that it's like
No,
specifically from, like, just so you kind of, you're visually kind of cued into the fact that it's from the UDC.
Mhm.
Might help with that whole having the NPZ and the HPC portion in there, just to kind of make sure that they're aware that this is a direct quote from the code.
I think we could visit that again after approving this draft.
well, this is gonna be it, right?
Yes, we're gonna approve it, so I don't know if we're able to do the, yeah.
Say, development zone as defined in the UDC. Call it good.
It's all good. The development zone continues to be challenging for.
Okay, but if you guys bring
Reasons
this up
outside
in
of this
another case,
document.
I'm gonna shoot myself.
This document is not the genesis of the development zone conversation. I'll just let you know, this is not the genesis of the problem of the development zone conversation.
But it wouldn't, I think it is helpful to have.
Yeah, no, I agree, it should be in here. I just was suggesting to take away this thing that keep referring to the neighborhood preservation zone and the RND. Because we are a historic preservation zone and we're talking about Fort Lowell.
Yeah, I didn't want to paraphrase it.
That's fine. I didn't realize this was a direct cut and paste. In that case, it's all
But you're
good.
right, maybe call it out as a,
Yeah.
you know, in
Just,
italics or something.
yeah. I think it's great that it's included in this document. It's obviously important for,
Just like you would in the textbook, put a box around, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So
so it's like a graphic.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to nitpick, Elaine.
No, it's okay, that's why we're here.
The Fort Lowell Development Zones. Oh my gosh, my favorite section. The Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone is a unique in contrast to the other historic preservation zones. It is both a semi-rural landscape and has been defined by organic incremental development as illustrated below, less this drawing. Requires determination by the zoning administrator. That heading's a little funny. Why, I'm not sure what's going on.
Why is that in yellow? By the way?
Because I feel like this is something that the board needs to decide whether this should go to the zoning administrator.
Whether it should go to.
Yeah.
So the
In other words,
required
should it-
determination by the zoning administrator is not a part of this document. It's-
No.
So you just want this,
Yeah, that's-
basically, whether you want to request the zoning administrator review this
This is a
essentially, right?
decision
And then
by the
make a
board.
decision.
Yeah, it's, so this document, this whole section can be left out. Or you can make it, I think that's what you have to do, isn't it?
Oh, well, let's
Leave
read,
it, well, you can either leave it out and use the rest of the section, or you can include it as it goes to PRS and let them discuss it. And, you know, just make a decision. You make a recommendation to put it in, leave it out, or take it to the zoning administrator.
So why don't we read it and you can tell us what the controversy on it was? Why we would not include it or so.
I think because we've been told we can't do it,
I mean, let's read it.
that it's in
See.
conflict with,
I think I remember this. but,
Yeah.
sort of, it's like, it's interpretively in conflict. Okay. Because of the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone's semi-rural, organic, incremental development, the neighborhood does not have traditional city blocks. And we've got some definition down here. A block is a unit of land bounded by streets or by a combination of streets and public land, railroad right-of-ways, water courses, and other barriers to the community, continuity of the unit of land. Just any barrier. A block may be comprised of one or more lots. Just one block. One lot could be a block. A block may be made up of one lot, may also be referred to as a lot or a parcel, and a street is any permanent, public or private right of way, other than an alley, access lane or parking area, access lane Access lane is in here twice.
Parking area access.
Parking area access lane set aside to accommodate vehicular travel lanes, parking lanes, bike lanes, pedestrian facilities, utility areas, and other such design features, whether designated as a street, drive, highway, thoroughfare, road, boulevard, avenue, lane, or place. On a grid, per the intent of defining a development zone within the HPZ in Fort Lowell, the private streets such as El Callejon, Francisco Loop, or Placita del Mesquite will be used as boundaries of a block when the city services and utilities for 3 or more properties are served. Fort Lowell is a natural riparian area with water courses, which may or may not be used to define a block. All public lands at Fort Lowell Park will be considered one development zone. Applicants are advised to seek guidance from the HPZ board for help understanding their development zone at the onset of their design process. With ill-defined blocks, there are many instances in Fort Lowell where defining different building styles are located side by side or across from each other within the same development zone. Because of heterogeneous nature of HPZ, the design context within the development zones will be evaluated as part of the HPZ review, particularly for proposed additions, renovations, or new constructions.
So one thing I see that sticks out just right off the bat, all public land at Fort Lowell Park will be considered one development zone, right? In the UDC on the previous page says public land and institutional structures within the development zone are not considered to be part of the development zone when evaluating proposed development on adjacent property. So I think they're gonna shoot that down instantly if we include the public land thing.
But they're eligible for, they're on the National Register of Historic Places, like the hospital and the old camp, like the fort complex that's on the park.
So
So the
What do you do?
intention, well, the intention here is to say that the park is its own development zone.
Yeah,
so we
Yeah.
should, yeah.
And so you're adjacent to the park.
Yeah.
The park is not your development zone.
Okay, so that's not, I would say that needs to be made more clear. Like
What?
just the wording.
What will they use in the development zone of the park to compare themselves to?
The other structures in the park.
The Ramadas, you mean?
No, anything like if there were a new Ramada, for example, in the park,
Mm-hmm.
then it would be compared to the other structures in the park.
I see. I think Park's been a good partner about coming to the board, right? Medium.
So you started to say something?
Oh, no, I think part of the issues that we had with this was, again, that the development zone's a very specific thing in the UDC, so we just need to make sure that this, meets whatever that definition is. And so I think the park thing, we may need to also talk to the zoning administrator on how that might work and whether that is a conflict. I'm not sure if it is. But we'd have to take a look at it.
I'd like to make a suggestion in the interest of getting the bulk of this massive lift done, that we strike these controversial items from this edition so that we can move forward with getting new guidelines out to the public. And then as a board, if we want to continue looking at adapting and updating the guidelines again around some of this last minutia that we're kind of in what I can only identify as a power struggle with the city about understanding some of these basic English language words. I move that we get this stuff out of here so that we can implement the rest of the design codes sooner than later and revisit this specific topic at a future meeting.
That's reasonable. One thing I will say though is that the controversial element of this, as far as the blocks are concerned. I mean, I guess that's what I want, right? Is what's the sticking point? Why is this
one sticking point is that we are identifying private streets, El Cajon,
Yeah.
Francisco Loop, Placita de Misca, and what's the other one? Spicer Lane is another one. We, in this room, view these as natural. What does the definition say up here? Barriers or,
Right.
you know, and the city doesn't seem to understand that they want all of Fort Lowell to be one giant development zone, and they want to see the fort complexes the same as the Mexican agriculture casitas. It's completely different. And like, it's,
So I think in that view, and this is to address the heading of this, right? That item, I think we should send to the zoning administrator.
Which one?
So to include El Cajon, streets such as El
right,
Cajon.
the first
So basically these barriers, as we say, natural sort of, what we view as natural indicators of a block, right? Those things, I think we should send to the zoning administrator because that's important, right? That's something that needs to be in these guidelines, not in the next iteration, next year or the year after. We need the people applying for review to know what their zone is. And if they can't, then we're gonna be in the same boat that I think the sport has been in historically, which is people are gonna point down the road, you know, several, what we would consider several blocks, and say, oh, but that's part of my development. We'll say, no, it's not. Right? So I think this is something that potentially we want to include and send to, and if the only issue is to change some of the wording regarding the park, I think we can do that pretty quickly right now.
but did we already go through a punch back with the city around these words? Yeah, we already did that one time. We've already gone around that case study with them.
For the,
This draft, these drafted words went forward to the city and were rejected.
okay, then so we can't,
It was in the comments. It was in the rounds of comments.
right.
The other
So we
sticking
can't
point
insist on this?
is saying something like we are creating our own definitions by saying that 3 or more properties suddenly makes these private drives into alleys, or roadways. But I think we're seeing them as even more it was very useful to do the outlet loud reading because, it like, or barriers to the continuity of the unit of the land. And when, again, this is where the city is off target with the intent and purpose of these zones.
Their own definition is not what they're saying is what you're getting.
The intent and purpose of having these development zones is to create a hyper niche within the historic zone so that you continue to have continuity in the neighborhood. But if you don't acknowledge that hyper niche and you just want to draw, commissary details down into this side of the neighborhood, then you lose this very subtle and beautiful historic context that we're trying to steward here.
So
So yes, we need-
from a process perspective, I guess we already know this is not gonna fly, right?
Okay.
So I guess what I'm asking is if we send it back to the zoning administrator, is there any chance that they will attempt to fix this or attempt to work with us?
Well, that's what this is it requires a determination, it requires a decision, right? So you can either, correct me if I'm wrong, you can either put it forward.
Yeah.
With like it is and wait for this part to be, we've already commented on this, it's not acceptable, right? Then you can put it forward to PRS. They can also have the same kind of discussion about it. But at some point, the city won't accept it because it's not compliant with the code, with their interpretation of the code.
And I don't think Elisa's done a formal determination on this.
No.
No, I think
No
it was
one's
just,
done a
yeah,
determination.
yeah,
It was,
so,
it was, the determination came during a case
yeah.
and then during the rounds of reviews and the
Yeah.
comments, right?
Mhm. And at least that's what's been explained to me, yeah.
Yeah.
So my next question then is there a way that we can right now soften this language a bit so that it will and send it to the zoning administrator so that it will be more likely to be agreed upon by them?
I think you have to request a formal determination. It's not just like, oh, here's some this forward, see if they'll do it based on this. It would have to be a formal request.
Right, but maybe, what I'm asking is, do we want to try to, in this draft, right, during the meeting so that it's in the record? Do we want to try to soften the language a little bit and make it more concise so that we can get this through and then ask them for a determination?
That holds up the approval of the guidelines altogether.
Yeah, I would like to say that perfection is being the enemy of good. No one feels more powerfully about this particular topic than myself, but I think we should strike these controversial topics and get these comments were never in the previous guidelines. We have so much more content rich.
Yeah.
That can be going out now, and we can continue to have this power struggle with the city
Sure.
about this basic topic of understanding the micro niches of the neighborhood.
Is this another thing we could sort of ask for
Yeah,
top down?
well, I think that's the thing, like the code needs to be changed for this to be able to work.
It's fine, the interpretation needs to go in line with the definitions.
All I know is that it was sent to our zoning administrator. I wasn't around at that point. It was sent to our zoning administrator. That was the determination. And I will say that there's stuff in here that doesn't meet the definition of the development zone. So the development zone is what needs to be changed in order to allow for this to happen. It's essentially what needs to happen.
Yeah, I think we have to take it out so that we can approve this work and then revisit this topic, which is important.
I will say this, it is worth getting the determination because Elisa will go through point by point and show like how it's not complying with the UDC, right? So then you actually know what those issues are. Those are the things you can bring to, this is word 2, right?
Yes.
Okay, so bring those to Paul and say, these are the issues that we have. And then will you support us in making this change? And that's kind of how it works if you had to go through and do that.
So, this is the second item during this meeting that we've discussed, taking a top-down approach on, right?
Well, we have to go through the determination process in order and get that final feedback that says, we're not gonna work with you around the intent and purpose of our own code.
Well, so I guess what I'm asking is.
What was the first one?
I struggling to
Excuse
remember. I feel like you suggested this for the second, this is the second time you suggested doing it. The first time I was trying to rack my brain to remember.
I think it was talking about the landscape portion, wasn't it?
Okay.
Maybe it was.
So.
It was also talking about that we had meetings, work started on a property, a complaint was filed for a stop order. All of the agreements that were made in this boardroom were ignored, and now we're having a home buyer who's held up in their transaction.
But that's not really related to the guidelines.
No,
He's
but
talking about these issues that
Yeah.
we're like continuously struggling with.
what I'm wondering is if
Document
we can,
triggers.
at some point, whether today or a future meeting, move as a board to write a letter to Paul Cunningham to address some of these things, right? And organize our thoughts so that we, can get some of this taken care of top down rather than trying to go through all these back roads.
And I will say this, so there's a couple things too related to this. One is that this is in the technical standards manual. It's easier to make changes to the technical standards manual than the Unified Development Code. The Unified Development Code is legislative action that's done. It requires to go through the planning commission. It requires public hearings. It requires a much more extensive public process to change the Unified Development Code than this, which is really, recommendation obviously from you and PRS,
Yeah.
but it's just a city manager approval. So it's definitely, it's a less kind of complicated process, I suppose.
So talk about that for a minute more about the recommendation. If this board made a recommendation, PRS made a recommendation to change the development code or the development zone language, that would go through.
No, so that because that's in the Unified Development Code,
Mhm.
that's a full review by the planning
Development zone
commission.
is?
Development zone is.
Okay.
This right here,
Technical
your
This is technical
guidelines are in the technical standards, which
Yeah.
are easier to
Okay,
change.
but
So
this
with the-
interpretation of the zoning of the development
Yes.
code
Mhm.
could not be done with a change of technical standards. In other words,
That's
they'd
correct,
still be
yeah.
in conflict,
Still be
right?
in conflict, yeah.
Okay.
Well, but here's my question based on that, because it defines the development, as we have on the previous page, the development zone defined within the UDC. and using jargon of block. And then we go back to this point where the UDC defines a block, which brings up Briggs Point, which is or other barriers to the continuity of use.
Interpretation.
Right.
It's an
So that's
interpretation.
interpretive.
That is an interpretive component. There's always components. Actually, the code gives the zoning administrator the ability to make that.
And so is there a place in the technical standards where that is, where that's interpreted, right? So basically what I'm wondering is if we use this definition of block,
Mhm.
right? Then yeah, El Callejón, Francisco Loop and Placitoville Mesquite are those things, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so
Yeah.
this is, I think what you're getting at is that it's in the code, as you say, right? But their own definition, other barriers to the continuity of unit of land, right?
That's an
Is-
interpretation.
So what I'm wondering is how do we make sure that that's interpreted, because we would interpret El Callejón as a barrier to the continuity of land,
Mhm.
right? And we would assume the city would as well, but that seems to be the point where we're having a problem.
Right.
Because the intended purpose is not being acknowledged.
I would say the best way forward is to get that formal determination from the zoning administrator, right? That's really, I mean, they're the ones, according to the Unified Development Code, are the arbiters of code. They're the ones who make those interpretations. It's their job. They have,
So
yeah.
do we need to do, how would we do that?
So you would draft up a letter and request.
Oh.
Request
To
that.
the zoning administrator, not to.
Mhm.
And if you can't get a positive outcome, then you can escalate your complaint. Like,
And you can, I mean, you can appeal a zoning administrator determination. So there is that possibility. I can't remember who it gets appealed to, but it either, I think it goes to the state Supreme Court or something like that.
So
So we're.
you made a motion
well,
to either
I'm saying
accept or
it-
reject.
I think we're really good to approve this draft of the design guidelines updated for the first time in 20 years. That this yellow text is not gonna be included because we want to be in harmony with the city at this juncture. Even though we are still working on this topic internally as a board and hope to get this determination and continue to get the information to be working in harmony with the city around historic preservation, which is why we're all even in this room.
So that was a motion.
Not really a motion, because we haven't, I guess I'll go ahead and open up the greater motion then. I move that we're going to accept these updated guidelines. And we're now having an open conversation. But can't you, isn't this the way that you do them? You do an open motion and then you discuss about the things that you want
Yeah.
through the course of that? Okay, so I want to open a
But
motion.
you can also withdraw your motion to the end and make a motion about the whole thing with the exception of this section.
I see. Okay, well then I'll withdraw and we can just get through this document.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody else want to turn reading?
I do want to clarify, the appeal goes to the Board of Adjustment, and then from the Board of Adjustment goes to state.
So we don't even have the benefit of our city council supporting us.
They're,
It's local, city.
yeah, it's city Board of Adjustment, but they're appointed by mayor and council.
I see. I'll continue.
Yeah, go for it.
Drink some
So,
water.
no, I'm good. I got my tea this week. For some reason, I knew this was gonna happen. Fort Lowell development zones continued. Plans submitted that are not compatible with the character, periods, or style of the subject property or surrounding properties, even though examples of similar alterations to buildings are found within the development zone, will not be acceptable to the advisory board. Renovations must be consistent with the style and periods of the subject building, despite the existence of other styles within the development zone. New construction must be compatible with its historic contributing neighbors. Specific attention will be given to height, proportion, massing, and details. The applicant should avoid grafting on stylistic details from neighboring buildings or a different period, historic context, or architectural style. This is part of the complaint that came up with the exposed wall. If there are no contributing historic properties within the subject's properties development zone, the applicant will work with the Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board to identify a set of appropriate contributing properties within the HPZ to use as designed. comparisons. The Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board will indicate the comparison properties prior to the design review. Types of improvement, new construction, neighborhood patterns and relationships, buildings and landscapes, as well as architectural styles and associated details combine to form the historic preservation zone's character. New construction should be designed in a compatible architectural style without imitating existing buildings. New construction of primary buildings will be based on the traditional street and building patterns that are seen in the project's development zone. The proportion, height, width, scale, and massing of new buildings will be within the range already found within the project development zone. Building street setbacks will be compatible with others in the development zone. Front entrances are not often oriented to the main street, consistent with the HPZ's semi-rural nature on the old Fort Lowell neighborhood plan. New roadways, lanes, and externally visible driveways should be constructed without raised curbs or concrete sidewalks in consultation with the Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility, and should use surfacing that blends with the existing landscape. Building materials should be in keeping with materials seen within the project's development zone. Mud adobe and burn adobe comprise most historic structures. Use of non-traditional building materials will be approved on a case-by-case basis. Materials should suggest historic materials through surface treatment, for example, by rounding edges, varying finishes to the appearance of mud adobe. Off-street parking should not be visible from the street. Place parking and loading areas to the rear. Screening may be required on a case-by-case basis. Utilize landscaping and other screening elements to screen these areas without negatively impacting adjacent property. Screening of parking areas, surface, wheel stops, etc. Using non-traditional materials may be required to be compatible with and protect the character of the historic preservation zone. All accessory structures such as garages, carports, sheds, patio walls, and fences shall be designed and constructed so that they are compatible with the aesthetic character of the residencies with which they are associated. Garages and carports are encouraged to be detached and located in the rear of the primary buildings. Garage doors must not be seen from the public right of way or El Callejon. I mean, any neighboring property, right? It's a 360 route. Garage doors should reflect the style of HPZ. Carports may not be in front of the primary facade. Single-family dwellings are encouraged, confined to one-story, individual detached, single-family residences of non-uniform facade. And if high density is allowed on a single lot, appearance of a single-family dwelling must be maintained. If a multi-unit complex is allowed on a parcel, the height and surfaces must be broken to suggest single-family dwellings. Multi-unit complexes should visually integrate and function with the existing residences. Major landscaping features, such as mature trees and shrubs, for example, and native desert landscape should be retained. This is especially important where plantings are seen from the public right of way. Vegetation on all externally visible land areas in front of the and between buildings and developed parcels should have the informal, unscaped appearance and natural native growth characteristic of the district.
So real quick, just because we talked about landscape already, and because I was thinking about this. Just as an example, and I'm sure there's other instances where this occurs in the technical standards. But for instance, in the technical standards, they do say for landscape removal, substantial modifications as determined by the PDSD director and the removal of plant materials and other landscape elements shall require review and approval of a revised landscape plan. So that implies to me that landscapes on its own is reviewed. Is that wrong?
Don't know exactly how that works because
Yeah.
it's a very specific section that I've never read before. I'm pretty sure that that's when you're going through and doing a redevelopment that applies to it, but I am not sure, but I can look at it. What is the section for it?
This is 9.4, and it's in 5-01.9.0 maintenance.
Say that again, 9.4.
It's so the main thing is 5-01.9.0 and it's 9.4, subsection 9.4.
Okay, cool. Let me take a look.
But yeah, and again, I this is my cursory glance to try to find landscape in the technical standards, but yeah, I mean, it's just to reiterate, it seems odd that we would not need to review major changes to the landscape.
I don't disagree with you at all related to that. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, you only review it when you have to come through a full review because you're looking at things holistically, but yeah. So anyways, I will take a look at this though. We'll see.
All sides of primary buildings are to be designed, all facades are considered in the design review process. Secondary buildings and structures, accessory dwellings, units, ADU, guest house and rental units, sheds, studios, or storage buildings should be constructed in the rear of the property. Should complement an existing primary building and should be attached to it, should not be attached to it. If the primary building is historic, an ADU should complement but not be identical to it and should be given as much design consideration as the primary building. Accessory dwelling units shall not dominate in the design, height, or proportion and shall defer to the main residence. The massing, height, and scale must be at lower than the primary building. Accessory dwelling units or structures built along alleys may have variable setbacks as approved by the Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board. Buildings and materials should be compatible with the primary building. Landscaping and other screening elements, for example, trellis, bamboo screen, can be used to screen loading and utility areas without negatively impacting adjacent properties. If the proposed secondary building or structure is wider than one lot, break up the height and surfaces.
So I just noticed something. Where it says accessory dwelling units shall not dominate in design, height, proportion, shall defer to the main residence. The massing, height, and scale must be lower than the primary building. I need to send that to the city attorney. Because the state law that came through 2720 last year said you can't have different regulations for accessory dwelling units versus primary structures. And so, yeah, I don't think you can't. So state law, I think, preempts us on that one, but I need to check.
May I suggest that we strike this item so that we can get an
Agreed.
and we can revisit this topic, but we must get this. Perfection is the enemy of good.
Well, wait, read it again because it says the massing, height, and scale will be at or lower.
Yeah, so it's the lower portion. Oh, I guess at or lower.
Well,
That's okay.
yeah.
That could work. I need to read through here just to make sure, but I think that would be the only thing, as if it's like
So we can
less
just
than,
change that to be compatible. I mean, it
Compatible,
already
yeah,
says
that works.
compatible in other places.
actually at or lower could be okay. Sorry,
Okay.
I missed it. Yeah.
It proposed,
Just another point about that.
I'm not to nitpick, but bamboo.
Without, this other one, landscaping and others may be used to screen loading and utility areas without negatively. Then the intention is that it should not negatively impact adjacent properties, not that it can be used.
And could we try ocotillo fence instead of bamboo screen? Because it almost seems like we're saying to grow bamboo as a screen, and that's not what.
Right.
Yeah.
So we give a different example than bamboo screen? And ocotillo fencing.
Well, there's a native bamboo like growth that's,
Oh,
what's that, Margot, what's the stuff in your yard? It's in
yeah,
your
we
yard.
got it, right. in the-
I don't know. Ben planted that many years ago.
It's Cariso or,
I
I
think
don't think it is.
I don't think,
It's
that-
not.
she just said
It's
Ben,
not.
your dad planted it.
no,
It's not.
it's in the other neighborhoods too.
Oh.
It's around
Yeah.
Gal's house.
yeah, something like that.
We have so much discussion about native plants and just,
And actually, I didn't think bamboo, I didn't think about planting bamboo. I thought about a bamboo.
Just,
spade.
right.
But planting
But still.
and the stuff
Yeah.
you're talking about, both are really invasive.
Okay, so what do you want to put?
Despite being non-native, they're-
ocotillo screening or,
In this neighborhood. Natural.
natural screening. Just put trellis, just say,
shrubs,
just
right, desert
such-
shrubs.
you could say such as a trellis
Shrubs.
or shrubs.
I don't show, I mean, the other issue with the trellis is it's not really.
Should come through my review.
Yeah, I think someone in West University is bringing a trellis through a review, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so maybe OPTO fencing for native desert shrubs,
Right.
right? There's your word.
Desert shrubs.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if a proposed secondary building or structure is wider than one lot, break up the height and the surfaces. Additions and alterations. Expansions should maintain the style, height, proportion, and mass of the building and surrounding buildings within the development zone. Changes will conform to the intrinsic and unique characteristics of the building. This character and architectural style should be compatible with the contributing historic properties located within the development zone. Place additions to the rear. This includes new rooms, porches, decks, and stairs. Do not disturb the street sides of existing buildings. Keep additions simple and appropriate in size, shape, material, and color and details that are compatible with, but do not mimic the existing building. Do not create a false sense of history by making an addition appear older than it is. Additions will maintain the style, height, proportion, and mass of the building and surrounding buildings within the development zone. Exterior alterations visible from the street sides should be kept minimum. Original elements such as scale, roof form, roof elements, patterning of solids and voids, windows, porches, and doors, projections, porches, steps, and parapets, etc. Architectural details, materials, and site elements should be maintained. Alterations will be compatible with the building's original design and historic changes. Openings, including windows, doors, and porches, should not be filled in. Their original materials, size, shapes, and general design should be maintained. Design criteria. Style. Buildings in the historic preservation zone generally reflect a simple vernacular style with design roots in the Sonoran tradition. Styles include Sonoran military, Sonoran ranch, Santa Fe, Sonoran ranch, Pueblo revival, territorial, and bungalow vernacular. See illustrations. The area's rural and low-density residential development resulted in an organic rather than planned growth. This informality is also found in the zone's landscaping, with retention of plants native to the Sonoran Desert and its riparian area. Here's the picture.
So one comment here, I asked Alan Scott to review this, and he said, where would you see Pueblo revival? And I said, it's in the new, it's in the new developments. It's really in Presidio primarily, so that style has been approved in the past. So just if you're.
But we wouldn't be using those as comparison properties for future development, non-contributing.
And then the Post Trader Store and the commissary are also have some Pueblo revival elements, right? So just in case you're curious how that got in there.
Is this something THBF can provide for us, or do we want to strike these words until such time that we can revisit?
No,
Graphics.
I think, and especially a territorial, the Klinko, Sackheim, the house next door, those are all territorial style. So I've also asked Alan Scott to provide illustrations.
Oh, okay, great. Architecture.
Can those just go in, sorry, this is just a administrative point, can those go in the illustrations without us having to review it?
Yeah.
You can just get.
He's the one that did these illustrations.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you have the person who did that?
Yeah. He's still
That's
here.
excellent.
Actually, his name should be, I think that's true.
That's helpful.
You could be cited here.
I'm just gonna say they will be provided. Okay.
Okay. Architecture. Oh, yes, continue.
Yeah.
Architecture, site and landscape form, the symbolic relationship that exists between the natural and cultural environment. The question to ask is whether this work fits within the historic character of the historic preservation zone or dilutes that historic character. Peggy must have written that. Sites are informal, semi-rural, and low density. There's a great variety of in front setbacks. Projects should conform to the general character or pattern of front interior perimeter yard setbacks within the development zone. The informal, semi-rural, low density quality of design should be continued throughout the HPZ for new construction. height and proportion. Generally, for building proportions, the length is greater than the height. Walls often have an irregular profile. 1 story is permitted. No designs will be accepted that is taller than the typical height within the development zone. Portland Historic Zone Advisory Board will support applicants by providing a normative standard of contributing historic property heights to help determine the typical height for the design review. 14 feet is the tallest elevation of a contributing structure located within the HPZ, except for the Post Trader Store. There's a footnote here. The Post Trader Store Las Atas Seatas, at 5425 East Fort Lowell Road is a singularly unique residential property within the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone. It is a former institutional structure on the National Register of Historic Places. Its size and height are not typical of the HTZ, but it can still provide relevant reference for other design criteria. This property cannot be used alone to justify height and proportion comparisons and must be used in the correct context. Very nicely stated, Elaine. It is not your sole design reference. That's all it says. Okay, the height of structures or buildings in the historic buffer zone are regulated in accordance to city ordinances 7902 and 8473. Ordinance 7902, section 2 established height limits of the HD historic, what is HD? The
Historic district.
That's out of context. The historic district buffer as 1 story, 16-foot height limitation. Ordinance number 8473 adopted in 95, amended ordinance 7902 to allow construction of up to 30-foot high school auditorium, 24-foot high school student center on the parcel of St. Gregory buffer zone. Do we want to just call that singular construction or just call it, this was only approved for these 2 buildings? Okay. Do we need to include it in the guidelines?
It's in the ordinance. That's the reason I put the whole thing in,
Okay.
just so it's clear that those are,
Mm.
I mean, it's in the ordinance, so 16 feet is allowed in the buffer zone. And then if someone comes back and say, but those are 30 feet tall, then it was allowed within a modification of the ordinance.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to keep it in here, partially because those ordinances live like at the clerk's office. I don't know how anybody would even know that that exists, so it's good to call it out so people know that that act actually
Yeah,
is
you know the
on
numbers,
records.
you can Google.
Yeah,
it.
yep, right, yeah. So,
Otherwise,
Pattern and rhythm. Solid walls predominate over voids. Openings should be a minimum of 2 feet from building corners. Symmetry is not characteristic. Walls often have an irregular profile of height with softened or rounded edges and surfaces. Roofs. Flat roofs with parapets are characteristics. Sloping porch roofs may be clad in shingles or metal. Mission tile is incompatible, and any pre-existing tile or metal roofs cannot be used as a precedent for justification for new roofs. Corrugated metal and standing seam metal roofs are not compatible except on porch roofs. Other materials such as rolled roofing on low slope roofs will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Architectural asphalt shingles that replaced original cedar shingles are common on historic gable roofs. Mechanical equipment, skylights, solar panels, satellite dishes, and any other roof-mounted equipment should be installed in a way that minimizes visibility from public areas or adjacent properties. Newly installed equipment on principal buildings, on secondary buildings and structures should be placed in locations that minimize visual impact. Rooftop panels and other types of units should not be mounted on street-facing roof elevations. For slope roof, panels should be installed flat against the roof to maintain the existing roof profile. And any visible mounting hardware should be painted to match the roofing materials as closely as possible. Panels and other types of units appropriate for flat roofs should be installed so that they are hidden by parapet walls. If none of the secondary roof elevations are an appropriate orientation for efficient operation, then solar panels and other types of units should be ground mounted or placed on non-historic accessory structure in a way that minimizes visual impact. Texture and color. Adobe buildings with lime or mud plaster are most characteristic. Use stucco, lime, or mud plaster with smooth or sand finish on adobe buildings. Exposed sun-dried adobe is also common. Stabilized and burnt adobe buildings are also present. Conventional cement plaster is acceptable on concrete masonry or frame construction. Stucco applicants with expansion joints and modern textures are not allowed. When stucco is being replaced on the entire exterior of the contributing historic building or structure, lime-based or mud stucco should be used. Cement-based stucco should not be used. When stucco is being repaired, the same material on the original should be used. Buildings and structures that were stuccoed historically should not have their stucco sheathing entirely or partially removed without being replaced with new stucco. Originally exposed masonry fences, surfaces should not be stuccoed.
So just really quick, because it's got brought up with the place Kay was looking. Exposed sun-dried adobe is also common. Do we want to specify that this needs to be stabilized in some way? So that people don't just,
Exposed
It's
sun-dried.
very case by case. For instance, we have a adobe structure on our property and it is unstabilized and unencased, and that's how it lives. It's a historic adobe structure.
right,
So
no, but I mean, you know, there's modern things you can coat it with, right, that are.
Controversial about whether to use those things or not. Like acrylic, those kind of things. People say that it actually increases the deterioration because it captures water behind it.
Mhm.
And then what they did, like at the officers' quarters, was they capped them with like a sacrificial cap,
Mhm.
but they didn't treat them.
When repointing and joint striking the masonry, including adobe brick on a building, be sure that the composition of the new mortar, as well as the color, tooling, and the width are similar to the original mortar. And the introduction of more than small amount of Portland cement into the mortar that is different from the original lime-based mortar will cause thermal expansion behavior and cracking of the softer masonry. Sandblasting is not recommended because it causes severe damage to the adobe brick or stone and accelerates erosion by allowing water to enter the pores. For detailed recommendations for masonry and stucco, see National Park Service Preservation Briefs, numbers 1, 2, and 22. If it is necessary to replace old bricks, for example, on a parapet, use bricks that match as closely as possible color, composition, size of the original. Adobe brick should be replaced with adobe brick to ensure homogeneity of materials. Do not use concrete masonry unit as a substitute for repair of brick adobe, as it will cause cracking of the softer masonry. Integrally colored stucco is acceptable on new construction. For previously painted lime stucco, care must be taken to use highly permeable paint so the building will breathe, or else the paint will blister and peel over time. Heavy application of water repellent sealers should be avoided, and ceramic paint should never be used on adobe. Colors should be soft earth tones of light to middle value. Avoid very dark colors and stark primaries. Blue window trim is common. In the case of repainting a structure, color is reviewed only in conjunction with a full HPZ review. The advisory board recommends that all repainting projects, regardless of the size and scope, adhere to the color guidelines as stated above. Projections, canales, shading devices, and porches should be in scale with the building on which they occur. Existing architectural details should be preserved during rehabilitation. Openings, including windows, doors, and porches, should not be filled in. Their original material size, shape, and general design should be maintained. The following details are appropriate. Doors, frame and panel or plate type wood doors are most common. Doors are placed towards the inside, face out of the wall. French doors are not historic, but can be used if not visible from the street or adjacent properties. Glass doors may not be visible from the street or adjacent properties. Windows, this applies to new and replacement windows. Double hung or casement divided light wood frame windows are most historically correct. Vertical dimensions should be greater than horizontal. Multiple narrow windows are preferred to large pane window. A variety of window dimensions and asymmetrical placement that is not symmetrical are common. Painted steel casement windows with divided light are common. Vinyl clad aluminum or synthetic windows are not allowed. Depending on the style of the building, windows are placed towards the outside face of the wall or recessed into the wall. The size and shape of the windows, whether new or replacements, must maintain the size, shape, and window styles found in the project development zone. Widths and profiles of mullions and muttons, number of panes of light, and the wood trim that frames the window opening to reflect the historic period.
So let me stop there for a second, because in other design guidelines, in other districts, they put illustrations in.
I believe they're in the unified development code, the technical standards have them as well.
It
Oh, they have
has,
pictures.
it actually has, their definitions. You
Okay,
know, this is the sill, this is the mutton, this is, but it doesn't make any recommendations about them in the technical standard. That's kind of the issue, but if you wanted to include pictures like that with, can you get pictures into the design guidelines? Yeah, or drawings, even drawings would work. To show, this is what we mean by a single hung or double hung window. These are examples at the commissary,
Mhm.
right? And there are others, I mean, there are other examples in other historic zones that show, you know, similar era
Yeah.
of
So
historic windows.
are you proposing that we put these in?
Well, that's a question, I mean, it's
I mean,
for
I'm
discussion,
I'm
right?
in favor of anything that can graphically.
That's
represent what we're
that's
talking
at the Fort Lowell Union Church across the street.
that's like the only, there is a picture of a double hung window in the code somewhere.
It's
Yeah,
in the
it's-
technical
it's-
standard.
But like you say, it's only defining the components, it doesn't actually say anything about what it ought to look like.
Well, this was something that the city had told us that they would be able to help us with. Corin had said that they would be able to help us with this asset. So is that something we can request as part of the submission of this?
I mean, yeah, we can talk to one of our design professionals to potentially, you know,
We,
mean, you've got-
like
you've got
similarly
photos.
to the houses, that's what we want. We want some pictures of a double hung window and a divided
I mean,
like.
we need a little guidance on like what works.
The ones that
and
we're
what's the
that
best.
we're describing in this guidelines right here.
Right, well, I just want to make sure that they're aligned with what is appropriate within the district, right?
How do we move that forward though, to bring those into this process?
Do you want to provide images or as
No, we're asking the
examples?
city for support because we are just citizens, but we would like to have a graphic included in
Well,
the.
if we did photos, I mean, it's not impossible.
And we can definitely include the photos. They would go right in the code. That's pretty easily done.
Yeah, I mean, we actually have been walking around taking pictures of a lot of them.
I mean, if we have images as well, we could provide those to one of our design professionals and they could do drawings of them. I'm just saying, like, we need to know exactly what you need as far as those images that we can put in.
So
code.
if we gave you photos and said, we want these photos included as drawings in our guidelines.
Hmm.
And we made that a stipulation of the guideline approval today, would that be sufficient?
Photos or drawings?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should be able to work with it's up to you guys if you want to do drawings or photos.
Cause I think it's a stylistic thing, right? It's not. We don't want to say replicate these windows,
Mandate
we want
that.
to say
Yeah,
these are
that
examples
is
of
a
stuff.
structure.
That's the convention of this document too.
Yeah, it is. Indeed.
Okay,
Unless
so,
anyone-
The Alan wants to just more drawings.
Well, but you're saying that the city could have something to do, yeah?
We have design professionals that we
Yeah,
have. We
great.
pay them a certain amount and they'll go
Like, they-
and do it for us. We don't have anybody on staff. We also
Yeah.
are in the process of hiring a historic preservation officer. So we don't actually have a historic preservation officer. That's part of some of the issues that we're dealing with right now. I mean, we're gonna get a new HBO. We're planning on getting 2 new staff to work with them as well. I mean, we're working on bulking it up, just takes time to do stuff. But again, I mean, yes, we're happy to help. We can kind of get one of our consultants to help with it. It may look different than the existing drawings that you have. But it would, it'd give people an idea of the type of windows that are appropriate.
So
I
it's
think
such an
if we
important
just
issue.
submit photos and say, we want these photos to be drawings in the guidelines, that way we can get this. done
So
right.
you could just say illustrations or photos will be provided
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
this for this section,
Yeah.
right?
but can we also do that in our next round after implementing what we have today, since that is not prepared and we cannot approve it in this meeting. And we're trying to approve a draft and then we can, again, do another pass that will be less laborious.
Yeah.
Do you not have the photos with you today?
You can also make a motion that says we approve it with these additions. And then it gets sent forward,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, I've seen the planning commission does that all the time. They say, you know, these changes, move it forward. Those changes get made between them and mayor and council. We could do that, make those changes between now and either plans review subcommittee or between the PRS recommendation and when we bring it to the city manager for approval. So you don't have, it doesn't have to be exactly,
Unless
That
you
way.
want to see them.
I would think that we would want to look at what resource we're,
Well,
well, yeah, we could always, you know, work on it, bring it back at the next meeting and you could take a look at it. I mean, there's not, you know.
I think our goal is to implement the more than 1 year of work that is mostly here without, so that this is implemented and then to come back around and do another pass,
Yeah.
right? Because what you're suggesting is, will that create another month loop around this discussion?
I mean, there's probably, because it's gonna have to go to PRS anyways, it's gonna take some time, right? So PRS and then it has to get a city manager's approval. So it takes time to do that, right? So it gives us time to be able to go and get those drawings basically done. And then next month, we could take a look at them, but they're basically in.
Hmm.
Like you wouldn't have to necessarily come back and approve them. We're bringing them back so you could take a look at them, provide any feedback. We make minor changes to them and then we're done, right?
but the document's still removed.
Document's still moving forward. In the meantime, we're bringing it to PRS. We're saying, okay, there's gonna be, you know, these graphics related to Windows that are going to be added to them. We're finalizing those and those will be sent to the city manager.
Mhm.
And then once it gets to the city manager, you know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
so I mean, it's up to you. If you want to scrap them, we can, you know, work on them and do another, you know, change further on down the road. Seems like something we
Yeah,
could do
I'd say
while we're
we
moving it
have
forward.
Examples in this district, right? I mean, we have different kinds of windows that are seen. And if you include photographs of examples within the district, and then you want to go back later and make those into drawings that are more specific, with more specific detail.
As
So
long as
that
it
doesn't
doesn't
stop it.
interrupt this process of moving the
Right.
document forward and it's not sending us in another loop, I'm
Right.
okay with that. I just want to see this get executed.
Right. Yep, me too.
So I'm just to like catch us up as far as, you know, when we eventually do make a motion to accept these guidelines. One thing is with the stipulation that the images are provided and drawings are made and added to it. Is there anything else that we,
There was something else.
there was, I thought so, yeah. I thought so.
I can just roll through it, I mean, when you're done.
You have notes.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, the size, shape of the windows, whether new or replacements must maintain the size, shape of the window styles found in the project development zone, including the widths and profiles, mullions, buttons, numbers of panes, light, wood trim frames, window openings that to reflect the historical period. Awnings and shade sails are not appropriate. Glass block and stained glass are not appropriate. Arches and lintels, arched openings over the main entrance may be appropriate, although rows of arches characteristic of Spanish colonial or Mediterranean architecture would be inappropriate. Exposed wooden lintels over openings are common. Gates, security doors, and window gates should be of simple rustic design without modern or elaborate decorative design. Historic site elements. Landscaping, native vegetation should be retained as much as possible. Landscaping should be informal in favor of native Sonoran desert plant materials. Stormwater runoff is best retained and absorbed by on-site for passive irrigation. In the case of historic landmark properties, plantings and other ornamental features shall reflect the historic period of the subject structure. That is a historic landmark, the Boulder property, right?
Mhm.
No, it's not.
Oh.
The only landmark is the chapel.
The chapel, oh, it's just on the National Register. Native desert should be covered with decomposed granite.
Not become.
excuse me, native desert should not be covered with decomposed granite, nor should decomposed granite cover an entire lot. And when used, decomposed granite should match the earth color. Plants in public view should come from the list of native plants recommended in the native plants and landscaping practices for the Fort Lowell Historic District and Northern Tucson Basin by Barry Spicer, published by the Fort Lowell Historic District Board in 2012. The book with a list of native plants is available from the advisory board. Fences, walls, and other physical features used to enclose open spaces or provide privacy must be compatible with the architectural style of the subject property, structure, and historic character of the development zone. Generally, adobe, stone, stuccoed masonry, ocotillo, ratake, latias, rough vertical wood slat, picket, and plain wrought iron without modern or elaborate designs are acceptable. Historic wire fence, field fence, and 4-foot chain link and ocotillo fence are often seen in the district. Corrugated metal or solid sheet metal fences are not acceptable. The height of a privacy wall, fence, or gate cannot obstruct the public view of buildings and structures from the street. Solid walls or fences at the front of the property should not be taller than 4 feet as measured from the side street grade, but may step up to 6 feet tall on the other side of the rear property. Privacy walls and fence materials must be appropriate to the historic context of the structure of the historic preservation zone. Gate designs should be simple without modern or elaborate decorative design. Metal wire or chain link should be rusticated or encouraged to develop patina. Fort Lowell Historic Zone Advisory Board will request a full review of new walls and fences on contributing historic properties. Parking, on-site parking will be located to the rear of the building, out of view from public right-of-way. Screening of parking areas may be required to protect the character of the historic preservation zone. Sidewalk, consistent with the preservation zone's semi-rural nature. The precedent construction of stabilized trails in place of sidewalks, as well as the Old Fort Lowell neighborhood plan. Concrete sidewalks are not compatible, although dust control, safe walking surfaces are encouraged. Mailboxes, which are not regulated by the HPZ, presentation should be compatible with the style of buildings and reflect the rural character of the district. Modern, boutique, and highly styled mailboxes are discouraged. Bring back the group mailboxes. The appearance, color, size, position, methods of attachment, or signs, excuse me. The appearance, color, size, position, method of attachment, texture of materials, and design of signs must be in keeping with the collective historic characteristics of the structures located within the development zone. Neon and black backlit signs are not compatible.
We didn't talk much about signs, but because there aren't very many, there currently aren't any retail or commercial buildings in the zone, right? Except for the sign here, except for the landmark sign.
There's the St. Gregory marquee,
Right, yeah, Gregory Marquee.
and Fort Lowell Park has signage.
Yeah,
And also, yes, the new zoning overlay. Theoretically, there's going to be more businesses.
there will be more businesses, but, so that's kind of something to keep in your back pocket to think about the design of those signs.
Do we want to make a suggestion about what material signs should be made of wood? Should be made of.
Let's do it on the next panel.
All right.
So just related to the comment about the new zoning overlay, I don't think that would apply because it wouldn't, it
Doesn't
only really
exist,
applies, well, and it would only really apply to commercial zones, R3 and more.
The
yeah.
commercial entities are gonna be going into the park. So they'll be at the commissary in the corner.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. You had made a comment about the overlay, so I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
There's this light commercial overlay coming to this neighborhood at some point. There's a lot of talk about it.
There's
No.
talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think the zones would allow for, at least as proposed, that would have any impact on things. So,
On the signage,
no, the overlay that you're talking, that I think you're talking about.
well, this is why we're talking about the signs, because there's gonna be more commercial, potentially more commercial activity coming to the neighborhood.
Yeah, okay, and then, never mind. I
We
was,
probably should look at,
Yeah.
I'd like, yeah, I mean, it's not relevant to this, but we should at some point talk about what are the sign regulations as it relates to the park. So, anyway,
Also, there's lots of really nice historic compatible sign examples in Barrio Viejo.
Hmm.
If you want to feel inspired about what that conversation can kind of go.
Yes.
Sorry, I tried not to editorialize too much here. Okay, utilities, above ground utilities in new construction are not allowed whenever possible. Undergrounding of above utilities is encouraged. Connection should be placed in areas not visible from the public right away.
I don't
Here's-
think you need to read all.
Yeah,
that.
here's all these contacts with the city of Tucson. Here's some literature you can pursue to do the right thing when you're designing. Here's some more resources. Here's some additional, oh, look, these illustrations do have. They do not state. They have, there's citations of who did them.
Those don't, those are the same as the ones that are in before.
Oh, okay.
They're moved up into the.
But they have the citations like you wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, to go back around, you can read out your notes.
So-
that we need to move motion.
You're gonna be the one making this motion.
Oh, yes. Steve ones.
So what I did as we went through was I made corrections and typos. Called out the references like PDSD. So how do you want to do it? You want to start a motion and then,
Well, why don't you just read off to me what you. What you have. In your notes, and then we can include that in the motion or not.
okay, 4.1, steps for review. To add as a step for review that courtesy review is recommended. Not required. That those be numbered instead of bullets, since they're steps. In 4.2, the reference to the UDC, just to add that what that those references in those sections are UDC references and not references to this document.
Sorry, what section was it?
4.2
To-
and 4.3, that installation of solar panels or cistern replacements refers to replacements and not installations.
Yeah, sorry.
So 4.3 for minor review. The last reference, installation of solar panels or cisterns or the replacement or repair of roof. Not the installation of a roof is not a minor review. All right, so makes sense. This is minor review, HPZ. It's a bullet point. The last bullet point says, in accordance with minor review procedure, the installation of solar panels or cisterns or replacement or repairs to a roof. No, it's not a new roof, or new roof would be something else. Okay, and development zone. Section 5.1, development zones. That the section that requires determination by the zoning administrator be removed from this document and taken forward as a request, a separate request to the zoning administrator.
So this section, yes, and I just wanna, I wanna use the word, the jargon you're using now. Sorry, say that one more time.
So in section 5.1, reference to development zones. The section that requires determination by the zoning administrator be removed from this document and taken forward as a separate request. For future, a future revision maybe. So in section 6.1 about landscaping features. I wasn't quite clear about whether you're asking that to be removed or changed or clarified? I'm not sure. That's where it's talking about mature trees, major landscaping features should be retained, especially important if lands in public right of way, vegetation. And then you quoted the technical standards manual.
No, I was just bringing this up as, this is why, I quoted the technical standards to say that we should be able to weigh in on landscape alone.
Do you want that
Right.
to be sent to the zoning administrator?
I looked at the code, we can talk about it.
Okay,
I can clarify kind of why. That's related to commercial, when there's already a landscape plan that's required. Residential doesn't require a landscape plan.
Okay.
So there's no change, there's no reapproval or anything of that sort, because there's no landscape plan. That's
but
fine.
the landscape, there is a landscape plan in a major review. That was the,
Well, that's, once you get to that point, then you have
Yeah.
your site plan. It's not a
Right.
separate landscape plans, like a landscape plan's like its own thing.
Okay.
It's related to commercial, so.
does this need to say anything
Right.
about a site plan?
I mean, I think that's part of your whole
Review.
review,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think this is the thing then that we
Your other
need to,
list.
right, this is my other list of letters we need to send. So this is
Okay.
one I think we need to send.
Okay, so that's your next motion.
Okay. One at a time.
I'm sorry.
In 6.2, landscaping and other screening elements removes the reference to bamboo and adds desert plants.
Cross. Patio fence.
Desert shrubs.
A 7.1. Style. Illustrations for public arrival and territory will be provided. And then the same thing on 7.9 windows. Illustrations or photos will be provided.
In collaboration with the city, right? Not, we were gonna do these drawings, but
Yeah,
the other graphic. We
All right, what I had. What was something for this? Accidentally deleted it. Yeah, so illustrations or photos will be provided in conjunction with.
well, right now we're talking about
Collaborate.
modifications to this document. So
Right,
you can put that as part of your motion, but that's not gonna go into the document.
okay, so the illustrations are not going into the document itself.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so then illustrations or photos will be provided and collaborate. Yeah,
stick it in the motion.
Okay. Up to you.
Was that all of the notations that we've been
That's all.
discussing? Good work. We can always update it again now that the
course,
biggest
of
part of the
course.
lift has been done. We
Yeah.
can
It's
actually,
a minor thing. yeah.
we can nitpick on it week by week if we want to.
Well, that's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Elaine, this is amazing.
We'll see.
Good work.
See what PRS says.
Irrespective.
So those things where you just know you're gonna miss something and somebody's gonna come in with something.
And that's why you have other people review it, but
That's-
no, you did it, yeah.
Yeah.
Done a great job of this.
Yeah.
Looks good.
sorry, I need to save this so it doesn't go away. Good. So.
Repeat.
I move that we pass draft 6 of the Fort Lowell Historic Preservation Zone Design Review Guidelines as the final draft to be sent for approval by the Plans Review Subcommittee. Given that the following stipulations are met. 4.1 steps for review, add courtesy review as a recommended step. Same section that the steps be numbered instead of bulleted. 4.2 specify that this is a part of the UDC, so designated in some way with box or otherwise to show that it's not a unique part of this document. 4.3 minor review, the word replacement will be used in place of installation. 5.1 development zones, the section that requires determination by the zoning administrator be removed from this document and be taken forward as a separate request. Sorry. 6.2 landscaping, remove bamboo and trellis and add desert shrubs in their place. 7.1 illustrations for Pueblo revival and territorial will be provided. 7.9 windows, illustrations or photos will be provided, created in collaboration with the City of Tucson.
That's good.
I get that motion.
Yes. Any discussion of the seconded motion before we vote? Hearing none. All those in favor of the seconded motion say aye. Aye.
I,
So I think we are unanimous in favor of this motion.
Fantastic.
Yay.
So just a few more months now, right?
Depends on
This
how-
time next year, it'll be.
So I know, well, PRS and check was crazy, but, so I guess once you're done with just
want-
those
so
minor,
modify?
I'm assuming you probably want to modify it before we send it to PRS, at least with some of those minor changes. There weren't a ton of them.
Yeah.
And then we can send that forward to
So,
PRS.
so actually,
I
that
think, or,
probably
yeah,
needs to be that you
I mean,
sent
I guess they could,
seven
yeah.
to them,
right,
right?
probably send 7.
Well, call it draft 6 because we just made a motion for draft.
So 6 with
Right.
changes, yeah, that was, yeah.
So you can make a second motion to say that.
Well, it was 6 with those changes, so it's still be, yeah.
So just call it draft.
Yeah.
Well, no, the deal is they'll get draft 6 with
Yeah.
your
Right.
development zone stuff, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
We could do that too.
That's okay.
Yeah, given that the following stipulations are met.
Yeah.
So then it removes your section. And
Okay.
yeah, it's okay.
Normally they see the same thing that HPZ sees.
Yeah. I mean, we could send them the same thing if you prefer. We could
Or
just do
send them
that
both.
and just say, we could send them 6 and say, this was the motion that they passed it with. You do.
I'm just gonna run to the.
Got any other business? I don't believe so. I think this was.
Okay.
He had another motion about writing.
Yeah, I was
letters.
just gonna, yeah.
Oh, wait for you.
Sorry, give me.
Okay, but just not.
Who's going to the flea market this weekend? Well, we say treasures and trifles.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
There's a
That's like
lot of stuff. I'm
pretty
sure my
impressive.
house is Full too.
Is it Elaine? You helped load stuff from the barn.
Some, yeah,
Some.
yeah.
What does the chapel look like?
It's full. I
It's
mean,
full.
it's just, there's
Not
all the
this year
furniture's
compared
outside.
to the past years.
I think there's some, I thought some of the stuff was not as good as last year. I think a lot of people are selling stuff online, their good stuff online, and they're giving us their not so good stuff, but we'll see. I
never know.
mean,
But you know, you
People's
sell a
junk
certain
is-
amount online and you get tired of doing that. You're like, I'm just gonna give this to the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
For the good of the neighborhood.
Some of that stuff I feel like that we're donating back from my parents' house right now, it came from the flea
sale.
market, and it's kind of like we just sort of rented it from the neighborhood.
A woman today, and I haven't been here every day, but a woman today donated a lamp yesterday and changed her mind, came and bought it back.
See?
Okay, sorry. I don't know if these need a motion or not, but the bottom line is that we seemingly need a couple of letters to authority figures, administrators, or Paul Cunningham, to address one, the definition of development zone from the guidelines that we were talking about, and two, to address 2 points with word two. One is that landscape is something that keeps coming up that we want to be able to review that may require a change to the UDC. Is that right?
In order to send solely landscape changes to
Yeah.
the HPZ, yes.
Okay.
I mean, as it is now, you're already, I mean, the guidelines have it there. You're reviewing them when people come in for any sort of alteration, changes,
Right.
et cetera. It's just not happening when someone just puts
Right.
some boulders out in front of their yard
So,
and makes changes.
and then the second thing is, that we need to bring up with Paul Cunningham potentially is the, how we address non-compliance with board recommendations. So if we say we want lime stucco on structure and doesn't happen, what do we do? What's our recourse, right? And, we need to readdress things that have come up in previous meetings that were,
Can I just comment
Yeah,
that there
please,
is a
yeah.
recourse, you can't, anybody, no matter who you are, can go and lodge a zoning violation.
Mhm.
Which is actually how I submitted mine, I didn't, even though I have the
Yeah.
emails, I went, cause I wanted it to make sure it got logged in the system as easily as possible.
Yeah.
And you too should report that way if you wanna report. However, for some reason. This project wasn't held accountable back in October, and so that's. So we have a recourse, there is a system for posting a grievance when, but there's a different level of accountability that's not coming in, which is that the city said, well, that's okay. You're seeing lime stucco go up, but that's not a concern, even though that was a condition of this project. And now here it is months later, having an economic impact on the sale of the property.
So do we need, the question is, do we need to make a motion to do this? Should we say that we're gonna draft letters and then we can make a motion later to approve those letters and send them off? How do we want to proceed with this?
I'm willing to be in a subcommittee with you on this topic to go meet with Paul.
Yeah.
Yes, I've wanted to do it for several months now. I've considered stepping off of this board because of how disempowering it is to spend all of these hours talking about the teachridge. Watch the concrete plaster go on and then be told by the city that it's not an issue for them. So for me, I'm more than happy to be on a subcommittee with you and we can get together and talk about it more and. Like, I was just gonna go to the call to audience. What up, city council?
I think it may
This
be
is
more,
more districts than just us. You see, this is happening on all of the historic advisory boards.
I think a good first step maybe to just talk to Cunningham on his own but by probably a formally lodged complaint such as a letter. And that way we can organize our thoughts a bit and do this in a tactful manner. Not that it wouldn't be tactful to go to the city during the call to audience, but it's just this way it's,
I'm willing to work with you on this topic if you want my collaboration.
cool.
Yeah, I wanted to do it, but I have felt very like, I don't want to do it by myself either.
Do I need to make a motion to form a subcommittee? Does that work? Or anything, do I need to do anything formal?
I don't know.
I mean, these were brought up as call to the audience, so, two separate issues that are kind of the same issue.
Mhm.
And that is how is it treated? I mean, is it the response time that's a problem? Is it the inspector that's a problem? Is it in
Yeah.
the
I will say this, that
interpretation of whether it meets it or not?
I will say this, that in the last 2 weeks, actually, today was the first day, code enforcement is now in our shop. And previously it was in environmental and general services. And so I mean, it's gonna take a while, but
Yeah.
there's like a lot of work that needs to be done as far as reorganization there and kind of how that works. So there will be structural changes related to that, that hopefully will help with that coordination between us and them. So I'm just saying, like, there are things that we are aware of.
Well, it may be good to say these anyway, because
Yeah.
could contribute to.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, like I said, I was looking at it today. I mean, especially the windows. I haven't seen the stucco, but I've seen an image of the windows. I mean, yeah, it's a zoning violation. It doesn't meet the decision letter. I'm not sure how it got there, but that's something we need to look into because it's a process issue, right?
Well, and also that you were, certainly the city was in agreement and saying, oh, they're gonna fix the windows, but then. The accountability stopped there, right? Like there was a
Well-
discussion that the owner was gonna do the right thing and they were gonna and we talked about it at the last meeting and. But nobody's holding that owner accountable. That's the city's job, not the board, right? Like we reported the violation, it's now.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's a process issue, right? And something that we need to look at and figure out why that's happening.
So,
Yeah, there's been some issues with code enforcement. That's part of the reason why we're restructuring. In order to try to figure out the best way forward and make sure that we are enforcing those things. So but it is helpful. All of this is very helpful.
so I still think, let's, yeah, the question of whether or not I need to make a motion, should I just do it? That way it's on the record kind of thing for the subcommittee, or like, doesn't matter. Briggs and I will form a
It's not an
subcommittee.
action, that's, yeah.
Yeah, so Briggs and I will form a subcommittee to address some of these concerns. These include the compliance with board recommendations and the question about landscape and how that's reviewed by the HPZ advisory board. And then secondly, we need to write a letter to the zoning administrator to or address with the zoning administrator in some way the definitions of the development zone with regard to what is defined as a block. And so does somebody want to take that up? So should we, is that the same subcommittee or is this a different subcommittee?
Yeah.
It's the same, for me, it is the same grievance, but to try and get the determination so that we can start an appeal process, because we've already been told that. They don't wanna read the same dictionary as us.
I wouldn't say appeal.
What?
I wouldn't say appeal.
Or appeal, or just that this determination process, which can apparently continue up to the state.
Yeah, you would request a formal determination.
Mhm.
And then that would be made by the zoning administrator. And then you can appeal that within 30 days to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment would have a public hearing related to it.
Mhm.
They would hear that, they would make a decision to uphold it or to reverse it. And then from there, you have the choice to potentially appeal it to the state. And so this happened, I don't know if you know about the TEP undergrounding or whatever, how that happened. Basically, zoning administrator made a determination that they had to underground within a gateway zone. TEP was not happy with that. They appealed it, went to Board of Adjustment upheld it, went to the state upheld it for that. So that's kind of how it works. We've had them reversed as well. There was a determination related to the Santa Teresa tile being considered a school. That was related to marijuana dispensaries. That got appealed to the Board of Adjustment and then that got overturned for that. So it goes either way. I think they're a thoughtful group. So just letting you know that's the path forward.
Okay.
So that was a motion. The motion was made. Maybe we don't need to.
I don't think it was a
Yeah.
motion.
I
I'm
think
just
we're just
saying
gonna collaborate.
Okay, then bring back.
I think we're just gonna tell them, we're just gonna write a call.
I mean, do you think, so the
Well-
other option would be to bring it back at the next meeting
I would like.
and then everyone votes on it and then
Yeah.
you send it forward. I think that's actually
Yeah.
probably has a little more of a, yeah.
Okay, I see.
The formal.
Mhm.
I will also write my own individual personal letter that will be separate from the board's representation.
Has to be one. Okay, any other business? maybe I can't, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You don't have to have a motion.
Oh, then
You can just get there.
It's just that. Okay. Sounds good.
I'm so glad you're on this board.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for making.
So Elaine, if I.
Thanks,
do I
Marco.
understand correctly, then you
Thank you.
are just waiting for formal approval of